a video on using up egg whites and making fatless sponge and turning it into biscotti-ish. Always an ish, because it's not proper biscotti, but it's an ish. So it's kind of there. So I've got a load of egg whites, and I never really know what to do with them. I can't be bothered faffing around with meringue, but you could do quite easily. But I was always concerned about what to do with egg whites if I had a lot of them over. So I worked out a recipe that works really well for using up egg whites, and you turn them into a sponge, which you can just eat as normal cake, or you can cut them up into sponge fingers and then dry them out, and then you dry it into sponge fingers. Or alternatively, what you can do is you can add some kind of nut flour and a bit of flavouring, and you can turn them into biscotti, which I'm going to do today. But the recipe's kind of interchangeable, so you don't have to use all egg whites. I'll write the recipe down, and it is, so you can just use whole eggs, that's fine. Or if you want to, if you've got a few egg whites and you want to use them up and you want to put them into the sponge and bulk out with the rest in whole eggs, that's fine. It's just all you have to really do is work out, and the contents of an egg weigh about 52 grams. So you kind of weigh your whites, and 52 grams of whites is essentially an egg and does the same kind of purpose. And that's the premise of what I worked on. So what we're going to do is I'm going to do a coconut, because I've got this coconut milk powder, which is spot on, nice ingredient, and it's a nut, so therefore it's biscotti, because biscotti has to have nuts in. So that's a nice thing to have in, and I'm going to put in, going with the kind of Asian theme, I've got some cumin seeds, which I'm going to put in as well. And you wouldn't necessarily think that cumin would work in a pudding, but it does, because it's a spice, and if you think cinnamon's a spice, star anise is a spice, vanilla's a spice, and they all work in puddings. So cumin seeds work really well. And then I've got some, whenever I've got a load of orange or lemons that I'm using, and I don't want to waste the zest, I always preserve it in a bit of sugar. So I'm going to be using some of that sugar as well, not too much of it, but it'll just give a nice bit of a zesty background. And once again, it's flavour for nothing that you'd throw in the bin. So I'm going to use a bit of that. I'm going to use some normal caster sugar as well, otherwise normal granulated sugar would be fine. And I'm just going to use cheap supermarket flour, because there's nothing wrong with it as long as you know what you're doing. If you use more expensive flours, more expensive flours are a little bit more forgiving when you're making buns and things like that. So, but if you're using cheap flours, you just need to be a little bit more careful how you use them. That's all. Like sieving them, incorporating them slowly, and all that type of thing. But otherwise, they're absolutely spot on to use, and I can't see why I would buy more expensive flour unless I'm making bread. Then that's different. So that's a different type of thing. But anyway, that's what we're going to do. So I'm going to whisk up the egg yolks. I'm going to whisk up the egg whites with the sugar, so they become a nice firm peak, and then we're going to fold in half coconut milk, let's call it coconut flour, coconut milk powder, and I'm going to and half self-raising flour, and throw in a bit of cumin seeds, and then bake it in the oven. And then when it's cold, cut it up into sponge fingers, and then dry those out further in the oven, and they make delicious little biscuits, just to kind of have. Yes, I think that's it. Yes, I'm sure. But yeah, so that amount of egg whites, I can't remember how much there is. I think there is, there's 320 grams, which is equal to 6 eggs, and then there's going to be 250 grams of sugar going into that, 125 grams of self-raising flour, and 125 grams of the coconut milk powder, and then I suppose maybe a teaspoon and a half of the cumin. I'll put maybe a dessert spoon of that sugar in, and then bulk it out with that sugar. I think that's what I'll do. So I'll whip up, and then I'll show you the combine, and then put it into the tray, and then you can see how it is. Yeah, that's it. Now I'll probably ramble about something else later on. Right then, so today's top tip: it's always quite difficult to put baking parchment into a baking tin, I find. So I've generally got 2 or 3 or multiples of the same size tin. So what I do is baking parchment on top of the tin, same size tin on top, and then press in like that. I realise this is a little dirty, but that's fine. I use it as a spare shelf in the bottom of the oven. So there you go, all pressed in, easy peasy. That out of the way. and then we'll talk about egg whites. So the egg whites have been nicely whipped up. I'll just show you. So it's like quite a firm peak that they've been whisked to. You can see that. There is talk about you can whip them too far. I've never done this. I've never whipped egg whites too far. Anyway, but you can see the nice flecks of orange in there, so that's going to be lovely. Egg whites freeze really well. Eggs don't freeze particularly well, and that's down to the yolk. But egg whites freeze particularly well. So what you can do is you can have little containers of egg whites in the freezer and freeze it, and then defrost it just before you use, and it's fine. Egg whites are a funny thing. You kind of want them to be a little bit old, and someone was described them to me as a little bit manky when you use them, because there's more flavour and they tend to make a better meringue by all accounts. So, and I've found this kind of quite true. So whisk them up with the sugar, and then we're going to fold in the flour. I have sifted the flour. I haven't sifted the coconut powder because it's a little bit clumped together, and what I find is that the little clumps kind of make a different kind of texture in the biscotti. So I've sifted the flour, but not the milk powder. So flour in, and I think we'll put in the cumin as well. So I reckon a careful teaspoon. We can always add. Very difficult to take away. So we'll start with 1 teaspoon and we'll see how we go. And then it's a folding and cutting method. So it's like that. So you can see that the coconut flour is in big bits, but that will break down as we mix it all together. Ooh, I haven't got the oven on. I reckon about 180 should do. And let's see if that business of preheating ovens really works. So if there's any big bits of coconut, I'll simply break them up. Now, do I want some more cumin in that? Yes, I want some more cumin. So I think I'm going to go for 2 teaspoons. That's fine. That's a bit of a big bit. That's not breaking up. So yeah, 180 until it's cooked. Don't know how long that's going to be. Half an hour, 20 minutes, depending on the size of the pan and how much you're making. So that into there. Do half of it in, and then you can see if there's anything down the bottom of the mixing bowl that just needs mixing in. If it doesn't, that's fine. So we'll get the most of it out with a spoon, and then we'll get the rest out with a spatula. With using egg whites, you are going to lose a little bit of the richness. Eggs get most of their richness from the yolks, so you're losing a little bit of richness. But the coconut's going to make up for that, and it'll be nice. You don't have to use coconut. Almond will be fine. Peanut, if you're not allergic to peanuts. Any kind of nut flour will do. It's just that I happen to have coconut in the cupboard and cumin, so that's what we're going to work on. There we go, like that. It is a bit of old baking parchment. I've saved it from something else, obviously not wanting ever to throw things away, but this will be the last use that it gets. Maybe not actually. I'll probably might use it again to making biscotti, but it is a second-hand bit of baking parchment. And that's fine. And I will point out there is a dirty mark on my mixing bowl. Can you see? Possibly. Oh, there you go. You can just see it there. I was faffing around with the blowtorch and I did burn it. It's not dirty. It's just a bit scorched, so that's fine. So this sponge mixture will go into the oven for half an hour or so at 180, and then we'll have a look at it after then. But it should be fine, and it should be lovely. Fingers crossed. Here we go. It's now out of the oven. It took 35 minutes, 40 minutes. It's firm to touch. You can't really overcook this sponge. You can burn it, but you can't overcook it because you're going to dry it out and make biscotti. Well, although you could just keep it a sponge just like that, and then do whatever you wanted with it, that would be fine. But I'm going to make this biscotti. But just goes to show that you can use egg whites to make sponges instead of using whole eggs. So if you get a lot of egg whites that you've been say you've been making something else like proper custard, and you're left with a lot of egg whites, you can make sponges with them. And depending on what you use them for, they're perfectly ordinary. If you were to make a plain sponge and then cut that in half and fill it full of jam and cream and put a bit of icing on top, that would be lovely. And you wouldn't notice the sponge not being as rich because you've got things like jam and cream and icing. So that's fine. That recipe works, and it works with half flour and nut flour, and it works with like 100% flour as well. So like instead of 125 grams of self-raising flour, 125 grams of nut flour, it works with 250 grams of flour as well. Self-raising flour. So in this country we have self-raising flour. In other countries you end up having to add a baking agent to them, like cream of tartar or baking powder or baking soda. You add different things to make it right. Not entirely so. That's a whole other conversation. I was going to go off on a tangent as always, but just goes to show that you can have the egg whites make a decent sponge. You know, it's got a nice bit of lift. It's nice and firm now. I'm going to let it cool down. Ideally, to cool things down, take them out of the tin and they cool down quicker. But it's quite soft at the moment, so I don't want to take it out of the tin. However, I will put the tin on something that's got air circulating around it. So I will put the tin on a baking rack, baking tray, baking rack. Yeah, baking rack, instead of on this board, because this board's just going to soak. It's just going to knock it won't cool down as quickly on a board as if it was on a baking rack. So on a baking rack first until it firms up a little bit, and then I'll take it off and put it on. Take it out of the tin, put it on a baking rack, and then that'll cool down a lot quicker. And then we can slice it up into sponge finger shapes, stroke biscotti, and then we'll dry it out in the oven, and it'll be lovely. Keeps for ages. Really nice, if I'm honest. But there we go. That's that for now. Right, the sponge is now out, completely cool and out of the tin, and has easily come away from the grease with pepper. As you can see, that's quite an impressive sponge, is that? Considering it's just egg whites, it's a bit of a winner. Right, so we'll use that again, and then we'll cut into it. So how's it going to work? So I'm gonna cut it into sponge finger shapes, sizes. So you don't, if you just want to make sponge fingers, this is what you would do without the nut flour in them and the other flavourings. If you just wanted to make a sponge and make sponge fingers, this is how you would do it. This is also how you make biscotti. The sponge fingers you can leave soft if you want to put them in things like a trifle or a tiramisu, things like that, or you can dry them out in the same way that I'm going to dry out the biscotti, and then they keep for a very long time. Once you've got rid of the moisture out of things start keeping for a very long time, as long as they're in an airtight container without the use of freezers or anything like that. So I think that way, I think the sponge fingers will be a bit too long, so I think what we'll do it in there. If you just visualize what kind of shape you want things, and then just kind of make a bit of a, they're not going to be equal, go a bit further over there and there. See, we all make mistakes. So that there, out of the way. Did we do that? Yes, and then that one. And then we'll got the sponge inside and see how it goes. There we go. You can see some of the flecks, which is the cumin, and it's a nice sponge, nice and what we call nice and deep. It's going to make some really nice biscotti. When we're going to remove the moisture from it, so it's going to shrink slightly, so the biscuits won't be that as deep as that. They'll be a little bit smaller. And because it's got things like orange zest in and the cumin, it's going to be better after a little bit of time. So it's going to taste nice today, but it'll be nicer tomorrow, be nicer again the day after and the day after, and in a week's time it'll be absolutely spot on because all the flavours will have combined. So that's that. I'm going to keep the edges because it's for me, but if you want to make them nice and neat, then you just slice off the edges and then go down like that. I'll just do one, and then we'll put it on the baking sheet on the greaseproof paper. So too thin and they're just going to fall to bits, too thick and I don't think there's any problem with it. No, there's no problem being too thick, but obviously you want a decent sized biscuit. So there, and just like that. So that out of the way, and down on the tray. Never got enough room. So use the paper again. No point not using it. Nothing's going to stick to that. It's fine. And you just put there. Now you will know. Holes in the sponge. That will be because of the sugar that I used. That's not a problem because it's for home. That's that. Space them out on the tray, and it's going to go in the oven about 100 degrees for anything between an hour. 100 degrees, fan on, and it will be in the oven for anything between an hour and a half, and they'll look them out nice and crisp. You just have to snap them in half to see through ready. But what I'll do is I'm going out, so I'm gonna cut them all up, put them in the oven, go out, and then be back in about an hour and a half, and the biscuits will be fine. They're not going to burn at 100 degrees. They're just going to slowly dry out, and then once they've dried out, they might get a little bit of colour at 100 degrees, but not very much. If you had it at a higher temperature than that, what it basically is going to do is it's just going to burn them. It'll dry them out and then burn them quite quickly. But if you do it at a lower temperature for longer, you get a much nice finish. And you will see, can you see? Because I didn't sieve the coconut flour, there is little spots like there and there and there, and that is the coconut flour which isn't mixed in properly, which some people would say was a bit of a cardinal sin, that you want everything incorporated properly. However, those little bits, when in the biscuit, taste delicious, and it's like a flavour thing. So you get like this different kind of texture, slightly chewy in the biscuit, really kind of quite nice. And you'll see there where that's the sugar that hasn't properly incorporated properly. But once again, that's going to get a nice little bit of orange flavour on there, so that'll be really good. So I'll finish carving them up, 2 trays in the oven, 100 degrees, and I'm going to go out and they'll be fine for an hour and a half. If they're not, I will show you what a fool I've been and made a mistake. And there we go, they are done. I was going to be out for longer than I thought, so I chickened out and I put them on at 75 degrees. So at 75 degrees, and they've been in for about 3 hours. 100 degrees would be fine. You just need to keep an eye on them, and if they start to go colour on one side, you just need to turn them over, just so they dry out evenly. But nice snap to them. They are delicious. Not for everyone's taste. Some people don't like coconut or cumin and things like that, but for me, I think they're really nice. So therefore, now I'll put them in an airtight container, and they'll keep for as long as normal biscuits would do, because you've removed the moisture from them. They're nice and dry. There's no moisture in them, so they're not gonna go off, and they're not gonna go soft. If it's a proper airtight container, you're gonna be fine. Yeah, so that's what you can do with egg whites if you're a bit stuck, or you've got some egg whites that you don't know what to do with, and you want to make a cake. You can always compensate whole eggs for some egg whites. Just a nice thing to know. I don't really think people talk about alternatives to whole eggs and better uses for egg whites, without just meringue or clarifying soups, or just having egg white omelettes, which are kind of quite boring. So it's just something a little bit different and interesting. And there you go. Can't think of anything else to say. Probably will do as soon as I switch off, but there we go. Thank you very much.